Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another video on the History Vibe podcast. And today I'm joined by Professor Jody Magnus. And today we're discussing her new course titled Herod the Tyrant of Christmas. The link to purchase the course will be in the description below and in the pinned comment. It will take you to the Bart Ehrman Professional Services website where you can go purchase the course. Again, the link will be in the description below and the pinned comment. And the course explores the real King Herod, the ruthless ruler and master builder behind the Temple Mount, Masada, and Herodium, and how archaeology reshapes his image in light of the gospel stories. When you get this course, you will learn about a ruthless king, a sacred story, and one unforgettable legacy. The Gospel of Matthew remembers Herod as the tyrant who tried to kill the baby Jesus. History remembers him as the master builder who transformed Judea. On December 13th, join Dr. Jody Magnus for Herod the Tyrant of Christmas, a Live 2 lecture event, exploring the real man behind one of history's most infamous rulers. You will learn about archaeology, power, ambition, faith, to discover how a single king's story shaped the birth of another. It's going to be a Live 2 lecture event with world-renowned archaeologist Dr. Jody Magnus, as she uncovers the truth behind Herod's reign, his political alliances, and the archaeological remains that tell his story. Culminating in the discovery of his long-lost tomb at Herodium in 2007, was Herod truly the Great, or simply the Tyrant of Christmas? Sign up for this course to find out. Online bundle pricing listed at only $39.95. So again, the course launches on December 13th. Join in, so that way you can listen and also participate in the live Q&A. You get to ask her questions if you sign up for the course now and attend on that day. Again, the link will be in the description below and in the pinned comment. So that being said, Jody, thank you very much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me, Jacob.
So let's start us off with, why did the Gospel of Matthew portray Herod the Great so negatively? Why does it portray him as an evil person that had all the firstborns killed and wanted baby Jesus dead?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. There's some disagreement among scholars about whether this story is historical, whether this actually ever happened or not. And the reason is that the only source that we have for it is the Gospel of Matthew. There's no other source that tells the story of the massacre of the innocents. And anybody who knows good journalism knows that ideally you'd like to have two independent sources to verify a story, and we just don't have that here. Did this ever actually happen? Did it not? Some scholars speculate that maybe it is a result of the reputation that Herod gained for killing his own sons, and that the story kind of stems from that. And I'm actually personally not all that concerned with whether the story ever occurred, whether the episode occurred or not. I don't think there's any way we can know. But I am interested in more broadly what the telling of the story tells us about Herod's reputation. And I know you're going to want to explore that a little bit further. And that is certainly something that I'm going to be going into in some depth in my lectures.
Did the Old Testament account of Pharaoh having massacred the innocent have an influence on Matthew's portrayal of Herod the Great?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the interesting things that we see in that story in Matthew is sort of the connection to Egypt, right? So what ultimately happens is that Joseph and Mary flee with the baby Jesus to Egypt and then eventually return. And many scholars have pointed out that this is a sort of deliberate device, whether or not it actually happened. Again, I'm not concerned with historicity, but it certainly is setting up Jesus as kind of a second Moses, right? So you have the flight to Egypt, sort of paralleling the Exodus, and then Jesus returning as a giver of the new law, right? Ultimately, that's what happens when he grows up. And so this is definitely an intended allusion to the Exodus from Egypt.
What were the circumstances that led to the appointment of Herod the Great as king?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and something, again, I'll be going into in some depth in my lectures. But I'll just say very briefly that before Herod became king of Judea, the country, and actually, well, okay, there's actually quite a history here, but before Herod became king of Judea, the country had been under the rule of a Jewish dynasty called the Hasmonean dynasty, and at some point, the country was annexed to Rome, taken over by Rome, and a couple of decades after that, the Romans appointed Herod to rule Judea as client king on their behalf. So there's a complicated series of events that go on that lead to Herod's appointment as a client king, but part of it stems from the Roman desire not to put the rule in the hands of the Hasmoneans, who they didn't think would be loyal to them, and eventually they end up appointing Herod.
What do we know about Herod's tomb at Herodium?
Yeah, and that again, that's something I'll be talking about a lot in my, especially in my second lecture, which focuses on well, which focuses on what we learn about Herod from the discovery of his tomb at Herodium. So Josephus, the ancient Jewish historian, tells us that when Herod died, his body was taken and buried at Herodium. And so we always knew that, at least from Josephus, that Herod was buried somewhere at Herodium, but the tomb had never been discovered. And it was only in 2007 that the late Israeli archaeologist Ehud Netzer discovered the tomb. And personally, I think that that discovery is the most important discovery in the region since the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the reason is because the design of Herod's tomb and the location of Herod's tomb tell us how Herod wanted to be remembered for posterity. So that is, again, something that I'm going to be talking about in my lectures.
What do we know about Herod's claims to have fulfilled the expectations of the Davidic Messiah, and is this related to Matthew's negative portrayal of him?
Yeah, so and that is ultimately what I'm going to be getting at, it, especially in my second lecture, which is this topic of Herodian messianism. And I will just say right now that it's a topic that has not been very well explored. There are a couple of very key scholars who have talked about it, but in not in kind of a book length study, which is what I'm ultimately hoping to do. And it's quite controversial. There are many highly regarded scholars who do not believe in anything like Herodian messianism. But I think that if we take the bulk of the archaeological evidence, including Herod's tomb at Herodium and including his rebuilding of the Second Temple in Jerusalem on a massive scale, that we can actually take seriously the observation of an Israeli scholar, a very well-known Israeli scholar named Abraham Shalit, who years ago published a book and noted that Herod appeared to have claimed to have fulfilled the expectations associated with a Davidic Messiah. And so, what I'm going to try to do in my lectures is to pull all of this together and to try and make as good a case as I can. Again, it's a kind of circumstantial, but I think it's a pretty strong circumstantial case. And I will be pulling the story of the massacre of the innocents in Matthew into that because I think it's actually connected with those claims.
And therefore, would you think that that the Herod's Davidic claims would have been a reason, or maybe even a principal reason, why he's part of the gospel story?
Yeah, well, I don't know if that is the reason, but I actually do think when I look at the story and then I look at Herod's tomb at Herodium. So, a little bit of background: Herodium is an artificial mountain that Herod built as a sort of fortified palace complex for himself. But it's also the only site that he built that he named after himself, apparently because there's a little bit of a footnote to that, but never mind. Apparently because he planned it to be his final resting place and everlasting memorial. And the interesting thing about Herodium, one of the interesting things about it to me, is its location, because Herod could have put his tomb anywhere he wanted in his kingdom, but Herodium literally overshadows Bethlehem. The mountain just dominates Bethlehem. In fact, it's even visible from Jerusalem on a clear day. So I think that when I read the story of the massacre of the innocents in the Gospel of Matthew, I see many things in it that I think are responding to Herod's claims as sort of expressed in this mountain that literally overshadows Bethlehem.
So one way of looking at it, would it be fair to say that it's looking at there's no evidence that historically that Herod the Great was even part of Jesus's life as an enemy or one way or the other. But could it be that the Gospels are trying to paint him as because technically he's a rival, a messianic rival to Jesus, that's why they're making them an opponents in the Gospels?
Yeah, that's a great point, Jacob. That's right. So I am not claiming any kind of chronological overlap between this story, right? Although I mean, we don't know how far back the story goes. I mean, where did it originate? There's actually no way of knowing. But I do think that Herod made certain claims, and we can actually see some evidence that at least some of his successors made similar or the same claims. And so there is kind of this, again, it's called Herodian messianism, right? This idea of Herodian messianism. And there's evidence actually that Herod's claims were accepted in some Jewish circles in antiquity. Again, this is a little controversial. Not all scholars would agree, but we do have some evidence of this, I think. And so I think ultimately what we see in the Gospel of Matthew is a response to those claims by way of, it's not Herod who is the true Messiah. It is Dave. It is Jesus, and in fact, not only is Herod not the true Messiah, but he actually tried to have the true Messiah put to death. Right. So I think that's kind of one of the points of that story.
And didn't Herod Agrippa the First make some kind of messianic claim?
There you go. There you go. Exactly so, right? Both according to Josephus and Acts. And so again, we see some evidence of this of continuity in Herod's successors. That's right.
And do you think that Herod's death, I can't remember, wasn't it in Bethlehem? Did he die in Bethlehem or am
No,
I
that's the thing. He died in Jericho, actually.
died in Jericho?
In his
He was associated with Bethlehem, but I forgot how.
Oh, that's actually an interesting thing. See, he is not as that's the interesting thing. He's not associated with Bethlehem. I mean, he doesn't have any official ties to Bethlehem. He's from Idumea. He's an Idumean, right? Idumean Jew, I guess we could say, or at least on his father's side of the family. And so Idumea actually is the territory to the south of Judea. And very interestingly, Herodium is kind of on that border area between Idumea and Judea. So that's also an interesting placement. Um, but not he didn't, as far as I know, he didn't have a direct, connection to Bethlehem. I think actually that the placement of Herodium is deliberate, trying to situate him to make a connection, right? A physical connection, a visual connection that otherwise he wouldn't have had. Because you can't be the Davidic Messiah or connected to the Davidic Messiah unless you have some association with Bethlehem. We see that in the birth narratives in the Gospels, right, where they're very firm about Jesus's connection to Bethlehem and David.
Yeah, that right there is what I meant to get at. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right, everybody. So again, I just want to remind everybody the link to purchase the course will be in the description below and will also be in the pinned comment. And with that being said, Jody, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Jacob.
Hello viewers, thanks for watching this video from the History Valley YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if any of you wish to further support this channel, please consider checking out this channel's Patreon page and becoming a patron, and or donate through PayPal or through Super Chat during your live stream. Thank you.